Hello, thanks for joining me for another video today. We're going to be creating this Christmas Poinsettias card, and this is actually based off of a card that I previously made, and I will have that linked at my blog and in the video description below. Today we're going to be using the Poinsettia Burst and the Holiday Script stamp sets, and I'm going to start out this card by making a whole bunch of masks to use in the process. So I'm just inking up. This is the smaller poinsettia stamp from the Poinsettia Burst stamp set, and I was stamping that on 3 different post-it notes, and then I'm going back and stamping the large one on 3 additional post-it notes. Now, I actually wound up needing 4 of the smaller flower, but I was able to move the mask and make it work for me without having to create that additional mask. However, had I realized I was doing that at the beginning, I probably would have just created the extra mask. So I'm fussy cutting these out, and I'm going right along the edge of the stamped image as I go, and that's just going to give me a cleaner edge as I stamp. This does take a little while to do so I'm just going to play a little bit of music while I finish up doing this. Now that all those masks are done, I can start with my stamp panel. So I just have a piece of whipped cream cardstock. This is cut to 4 inches tall by 5 1/4 inches wide. I'm going to go ahead and ink up my first stamp in Cranberry Bliss ink and go ahead and stamp it off to the left-hand side of the page there. And then I'm going to take one of those masks and just cover up the flower that I just stamped. So now I'm going to go in with the smaller flower stamp inked in the Peaches and Cream ink and go ahead and stamp that over the top of the other masked image. And then I'll mask that off. I'm going to continue this across the page. You can see with these flowers there is actually a direction that is matched with it. So you'll see me twisting the masks just a little bit so that I get the masking right on the petals with it. And I'll just continue along the page, alternating between the Peaches and Cream and the Cranberry Bliss stamps. Now that I have all my flowers stamped, I'm going to come in with the leaf stamp, as well as I will also be bringing in the pine branch stamp from that same stamp set. And I'm stamping the leaf in Fresh Forest ink, and then I will be stamping the pine branch in green olive ink. I'm just kind of filling in around the flowers where I think there needs to be just a little bit more something in that white space. And then right here you'll see me lift up that mask from the left-hand side of the card and move it over to the right to cover that additional flower that I stamped. And that'll give me the ability to stamp the greenery over the top and make it look like it's coming from behind that flower. Okay, and now I'm just peeling up all of those masks. We've got the panel stamped. That's just going to reveal all those flowers. Now I'm going to take the Christmas die cut from the Holiday Script bundle, and I'm going to actually die cut that from my stamped panel. I just kind of lined it up to see where I was going to be making the cut. I'm going to put it here on my platinum machine and run that through to die cut this. Now this is just an outline type die, so it just cuts around where the stamp would be normally. Now I will say, save the panel that you die cut out. You'll see why I did that in a minute, why I wound up using it again. But I'm going to now take my whipped cream card base and just folding it in half so I can line everything up. I'm going to line up this panel so I make sure I have an even border all the way around the card. And I'm using some colorless pan pastel on my card base. I'm going to be heat embossing on this, so I want to make sure that there's not going to be any stray embossing powder anywhere. I was going to just lay that panel on top, but I decided at the last minute that I probably better actually adhere it down. So I used just the tiniest amount of the Easy Glide permanent adhesive runner. That'll just hold the panel in place while I go ahead and stamp. So I'm lining my stamp up inside of that die cut, and I decided to grab my stamp positioner really quick because I wanted to make sure that this landed right in that die cut. So I'm just lining up the stamp positioner because I can feel where that's sitting inside that die cut. So I'm just lining up the stamp, use the stamp positioner to help me stamp it, and then I take that panel off to add my embossing powder and melt it down. I always get asked why I start with the heat embossing gun behind the cardstock, and it's actually because I tend to find I get a smoother melt on embossing powder if I go from behind rather than if I go from the top. A lot of times I feel like when I go from the top, I have kind of a wonky melt. It doesn't have quite as smooth of a finish. So I'm adding foam squares to the back of that panel, and I usually would put 2 foam squares in the center. What I have done is I took those 2 foam squares and I just cut them in half to make sure that they would go around where that word is going to sit. And I'm just adhering that panel on top of my card base so that that word shows through that die cut piece. And I had a landing issue, so I had to adjust just a little bit because I landed kind of funny on there. And at this point, I remembered I wanted to add some sparkle silk, and I had forgotten to put it on already. So I took that die cut piece and I actually inserted it back into the hole that was left and added my sparkle silk at this point. And then I can just remove that die cut piece and I have a clean sentiment. There's no sparkle silk that got down into where that sentiment is. And that's the card for today. Really, really easy. Really pretty. I think this is a great Christmas card. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Much love to you all. Bye.